Have you ever made a decision in seconds that changed everything? Elena Brooks thought she was just surviving an awkward moment when she spotted her ex-boyfriend across a crowded ballroom at the most exclusive hotel in Manhattan. With panic rising in her chest, she did something completely out of character. She hugged a tall, elegant man in a perfectly tailored suit. What she didn't know was that this man, standing alone by the marble columns, was no ordinary person. He was one of the most powerful men in the city, someone who could buy the entire hotel without batting an eye. But at that moment, neither of them cared about money, status, or the glittering world around them. They were just two souls searching for something real. But what happened next? No one in that ballroom could have ever imagined. If this story touches you, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments, where are you listening to this message from? Your support is what keeps this channel alive. The polished marble reflected the crystal chandeliers like water mirrors, and Elena Brooks felt like an imposter navigating through champagne glasses and whispered conversations in French. The Meridian Hotel was the kind of place where she would usually deliver coffee, not where she would attend as a guest. Her navy blue dress, bought on sale 3 months ago, seemed to lose its shine under the golden lights of the ballroom. "Just deliver the gift and leave," she muttered to herself, adjusting the strap of her purse on her shoulder. The uncomfortable heels made each step sound like a small echo of insecurity on the gleaming floor. Eleanor had met Sarah in college when they shared instant ramen and dreams too big for their tight budgets. Now Sarah was marrying an heir to a real estate dynasty, and Elena still wrote on napkins during breaks at the cafe where she worked. As she crossed the ballroom toward the gift table, her heart stopped. There he was, Thomas. Her ex-boyfriend, the one who had broken her heart into pieces 2 years ago, was leaning against the bar, smiling charmingly at a blonde woman in a dress that probably cost more than Elena's rent for 6 months. The air seemed to grow thicker. Elena felt her palms sweat, and for a terrible moment she considered hiding behind a marble column. Thomas had that way of making her feel small, like his presence was a constant reminder that she would never be enough. "No, no, no," she whispered, watching Thomas turn in her direction. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, and she saw the instant recognition in his face. He began to move toward her with that smug smile she knew so well. Panic took over Eleanor. She couldn't face Thomas. Not here, not dressed like a cheaper version of herself, not when he was clearly thriving while she still struggled to pay the bills. Her eyes desperately scanned the ballroom, searching for an exit, a distraction, anything. That's when she saw him, a tall man, standing alone near the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. He held a glass of red wine, but wasn't drinking. There was something in his posture, a stillness that contrasted with the bustling ballroom. His dark suit was impeccable, tailored in a way Eleanor recognized from the magazines she flipped through at the dentist's office. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. Even from a distance, she could tell he was watching the crowd with an almost bored expression. Without thinking twice, Eleanor walked directly up to him. The masculine fragrance, something expensive with notes of cedar and bergamot, reached her before she even spoke a word. "Sorry," she said, approaching and gently placing her hand on his arm. "I know this is going to sound completely crazy, but could you pretend to know me for a few minutes?" The man turned toward her, and Eleanor felt the air leave her lungs. Up close, he was even more striking. Dark hair with some gray streaks at the temples, eyes of a blue so deep they looked gray in the golden light of the ballroom, and an expression that went from surprise to something resembling amusement. "Pretend to know you?" he repeated with a deep, smooth voice that had a hint of an accent Elena couldn't place. "That's an interesting approach." "Please," Elena whispered, realizing Thomas was getting closer. "My ex is coming toward me, and I really can't deal with this right now. I beg you." The stranger followed her gaze to Thomas, who was just a few meters away, and something in his expression shifted. It wasn't jealousy or possessiveness, but an almost instant understanding. Like he knew exactly what it felt like to want to disappear. "Of course," he said, setting his wineglass down on a nearby table and turning completely toward Elena. "How would you like to do this?" The simplicity of his answer caught her off guard. She had expected questions, hesitation, maybe even a polite refusal, but he just agreed. I I didn't think this through, she admitted. Eleanor, Thomas's voice sliced through the conversation like a blade. Wow, what a surprise to see you here. Eleanor felt her body tense, but before she could respond, the stranger took a step closer to her, not in an invasive way, but protective, as if he were creating an invisible shield between her and Thomas. Darling, he said with a familiarity that sounded surprisingly natural, aren't you going to introduce me to your friend? The word friend was spoken with such cold politeness that Elena had to suppress a smile. Thomas seemed momentarily disoriented, looking from Elena to the stranger with an expression that mixed confusion, and, she took pleasure in noticing, a hint of intimidation. Thomas, this is... Elena paused, realizing she didn't know the man's name. Daniel, he completed smoothly, extending his hand to Thomas. Daniel Carter. Thomas shook the offered hand, but Elena noticed how he had to look up to meet Daniel's eyes. Thomas Hartwell. Elena and I have history. Had, Elena quickly corrected. We had history. Daniel slid his arm around Elena's waist, a casual gesture that sent a wave of warmth through her. Well, the past is the past, right? Elena and I were just enjoying the present. The implication in Daniel's words was subtle but clear. Thomas got the message, his cheeks flushing slightly. Sure, well, it was nice to see you, Elena, Thomas said, clearly uncomfortable. Maybe we'll talk later. Maybe, Elena replied, but her voice carried no promise. They watched Thomas walk away, and only when he disappeared into the crowd did Daniel release Elena. She immediately missed the warmth of his touch. Thank you, she said, turning to face him. Seriously, I owe you one. Daniel studied her for a moment, and Elena felt like he was seeing through all her carefully built defenses. Actually, he said, picking up his wineglass again, I think you did me a favor too. These things can be suffocating. It's refreshing to find someone who isn't here for the usual reasons. Usual reasons? Networking, social climbing, the usual games people play, Daniel explained, taking a sip of his wine. You're here for something different. I'm here for friendship, Elena said. Sarah and I were close in college. I just wanted to drop off a gift and escape before anyone noticed you didn't belong here, Daniel completed. But there was no judgment in his voice, only understanding. Eleanor stared at him, surprised by his insight. How do you know? I recognize the look, he said simply. The question is, what do we do now? And at that moment, standing in the middle of a ballroom full of people she would probably never understand, Eleanor asked herself the same thing. Well, Elena said, letting out a nervous laugh, I guess I should offer you a drink as thanks. It's the least I can do after using you as a human shield. Daniel tilted his head slightly, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. That would be nice, but I have a better suggestion. He gestured toward a discreet staircase in the corner of the ballroom. The rooftop lounge. Quieter, better view, and definitely fewer chances of unwanted encounters. Eleanor hesitated for a moment. Following a stranger to a more secluded place should have set off all her safety alarms, but there was something about Daniel that reassured her. Maybe it was the way he had dealt with Thomas, protective but respectful. Or maybe it was simply the fact that for the first time in months, she felt seen by someone. Okay, she said, but you'll have to guide me. I'm not exactly an expert at navigating five-star hotels. Don't worry, Daniel replied, starting to walk. I know the way. As they ascended the spiral staircase, Elena noticed how Daniel greeted the passing staff members discreetly. A barely noticeable nod to the sommelier, a polite smile to the manager checking the floral arrangements. There was a familiarity there that intrigued her. The rooftop lounge was a revelation. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of lit-up Manhattan, and the space was decorated with modern furniture in cream and gold tones. Only a few people occupied the scattered armchairs, conversing in low tones. Daniel led her to a table near the windows, where the city lights created a cinematic backdrop. A waiter appeared almost instantly, as if materialized out of the air. Good evening, Mr. Carter, the waiter said. The usual. Actually, no, Daniel replied, looking at Elena. What would you like to drink? A red wine would be great, Elena said, feeling a bit intimidated by the waiter's attention. 2 glasses of the 2015 Bordeaux, Daniel ordered. And thank you, Marcus. When they were alone, Elena couldn't contain her curiosity. Do you come here often? Sometimes, Daniel said, leaning back in his chair. For meetings mostly, but rarely for dramatic rescues. Elena blushed. About that, I'm sorry for putting you in that situation. It's not typical of me to approach strangers and ask for bizarre favors. Don't apologize, Daniel said, his voice soft but firm. Honestly, it was the most interesting thing that's happened to me in weeks. Most of the conversations down there are about investment funds and properties in Hampton. Ah, Elena said, a realization forming. You work in finance. Daniel gave an enigmatic smile. Something like that. And you, let me guess, not exactly from the corporate world. That obvious? Eleanor laughed. I work at a cafe. The Daily Grind in Brooklyn. Glamorous, I know. And what else? Daniel asked, leaning slightly forward. Because I have a feeling serving coffee isn't all you do. Eleanor was surprised by the question. Most people, especially at events like this, seemed satisfied with superficial answers. I write, or try to write, mostly on napkins and the backs of receipts during breaks. What kind of writing? Romance. Stories about ordinary people finding something extraordinary in their ordinary lives. Eleanor paused, realizing the irony of the moment. Actually, I think I just lived one of those stories a few minutes ago. The waiter returned with the wine, and Daniel waited until they were alone again before responding. Thomas seemed to be more than just an ex. There was history there. Eleanor swirled her wine in the glass, watching the red legs drip down the sides. 2 years of relationship. He made me feel like I was a project for improvement, you know? Like I needed to be fixed, updated to fit into the life he had planned. And you tried to fit in. For a while, Elena admitted, I changed the way I dressed, my weekend plans, even the way I spoke. I tried to be the version of myself he wanted. But it was never enough. I was always almost there, but never really there. Daniel drank his wine slowly, processing her words. He's an idiot. The simplicity of the statement made Elena laugh, a genuine, freeing laugh. Thank you. It's not that I didn't know that intellectually, but hearing it from a complete stranger is validating. Not so strange now, Daniel said. After all, we've already played a convincing couple. True, Elena agreed, feeling the warmth spreading through her chest. And it wasn't just the wine. And you, I have to ask, do you do this often? Saving damsels in distress at social events? This was definitely a first, Daniel laughed. Normally I'm trying to avoid conversations, not facilitate them. Why? Daniel paused as if carefully choosing his words. Let's just say, most of the people I meet at these events have very clear motives. They know exactly who I am before we even talk. And is that bad? It's limiting. It makes it hard to know if someone is interested in you as a person or what you represent. Elena studied his face, noticing a vulnerability he was trying to hide behind his polished composure. Well, for the record, I have no idea what you represent. I just know you were kind to a stranger in panic and that you have good taste in wines. And that's refreshing, Daniel said, meeting her eyes. Very refreshing. They drank in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city lights twinkle like earthly stars. Elena felt strangely at ease, as if she had known Daniel for much longer than the 40 minutes that had passed since their first meeting. Can I ask you something? Daniel said finally. Of course. Why did you really come tonight? Not just the gift story. What was your real motivation? Elena considered the question. Curiosity, I guess. Sarah always talked about this world when we were friends. I wanted to see what it was like, even knowing I wouldn't belong to it. And maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I can be in places like this without falling apart completely. And how's that mission going? Elena looked around the elegant lounge, then back at Daniel. Better than I expected, especially considering I started the night by hugging a complete stranger. Technically, you hugged me because I was a complete stranger, Daniel corrected with a smile. If you knew who I was, maybe you would have chosen someone else. There was something in the way he said that made Eleanor furrow her brows. Who are you, Daniel? He hesitated, swirling the wine glass between his fingers. Someone who rarely has honest conversations like this. It wasn't exactly an answer, and they both knew that. But Elena decided not to press. For now, it was enough just to be there, in that moment suspended between strangers and acquaintances, where the possibilities seemed endless. "Well," she said, raising her glass, "to honest conversations and unexpected rescues, and not belonging to the right places for the right reasons," Daniel added, clinking his glass with hers. The crystal-clear sound echoed between them, sealing something neither of them could yet name. The second glass of wine had left Elena feeling more relaxed, her words flowing with an honesty she rarely allowed strangers. Daniel listened with a focus that made her feel as if her stories truly mattered, not just as polite social conversation, but as genuine fragments of a life worth getting to know. "So you really haven't published anything?" Daniel asked, resting his chin in his hand as he watched Elena speak animatedly about a short story she had written about a florist who communicated with plants. "Not officially," Elena admitted, blushing slightly. "I have a blog that 3 people read. My mom, my best friend Olivia, and someone in Portland who always comments with heart emojis. Not exactly the New York Times." "But you keep writing." "I can't stop," Elena said, shrugging. "It's like breathing. Even when it feels pointless, even when I pay the bills serving coffee instead of creating worlds, I still wake up with stories in my head." Daniel was quiet for a moment, watching the city lights through the window. "You said something interesting earlier, about ordinary people finding something extraordinary." "My favorite theme," Elena confirmed. "I think magic exists in the little moments. An unexpected conversation, a brave choice, the way someone looks at you when they think you're not watching." She stopped abruptly, realizing that Daniel was looking at her exactly that way, like she was something unexpected and precious that had stumbled into his night. "Sorry," Elena said quickly. "I talk too much when I drink wine. Occupational hazard of being a writer, always overanalyzing everything." "Don't apologize," Daniel said, his voice softer than before. "It's refreshing to hear someone talk about the world that way. Most people I know see life as a series of transactions, goals to achieve, metrics to hit. And you? How do you see life?" Daniel paused for a long moment, swirling his wine in the glass. "Honestly, lately it's like something happening around me, but not necessarily to me. Like I'm an observer of my own existence." The raw vulnerability in his voice made Elena's heart tighten. "That sounds lonely." "It is," Daniel admitted. "Very lonely." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their confessions hanging between them. Elena wanted to ask more, wanted to understand what had created that melancholy in his eyes, but something told her pressing would break the fragile spell they had created. "Can I tell you something?" Daniel said finally. "Something that might change the way you see me." Elena's stomach tightened. "You're married?" "No," Daniel laughed, a genuine laugh that eased the tension. "Definitely not married. It's more complicated than that." "Okay," Elena said cautiously. "I'm listening." Daniel took a deep breath. "You remember when you asked about my work and I said something like that about finance?" "Yes." "Well, the truth is I own some companies. Several companies, actually. Carter Holdings. Maybe you've heard of it." Elena blinked. Carter Holdings. Even she, who paid very little attention to the corporate world, had heard that name. It was on billboards all over the city. It sponsored cultural events, and it had been mentioned in almost every article about real estate development in New York in the past 5 years. You're that Carter," she said slowly. "I'm that Carter." Elena processed the information, a series of realizations falling into place. The familiarity of the hotel staff, the way the waiter had appeared instantly, the way Daniel knew the hotel so well. "You probably own this place," she said. "Actually, no," Daniel said, "but my company manages the investment group that owns 40% of it." "My God," Elena murmured, covering her face with her hands. "I hugged a billionaire. I literally used a billionaire as a human shield to avoid my ex-boyfriend." "Hey," Daniel said softly, leaning forward. "Look at me." Elena reluctantly lowered her hands. "You didn't hug me because I'm a billionaire. You hugged me because I was a stranger who seemed safe. And I accepted because, Well, because it's been a long time since anyone saw me as just a man in a suit, not as a business opportunity or a social trophy. But you are. Elena gestured vaguely. You're important, rich, powerful. And I'm... You're what? Daniel interrupted. A woman who works hard, who chases her dreams even when it's tough, who was kind enough to thank a stranger for a favor by offering to buy him a drink. Elena, you're exactly the kind of person I rarely meet. The kind of person you rarely meet, because we move in completely different worlds, Elena pointed out. You go home to an apartment that probably has a view of Central Park, and I go home to a studio in Brooklyn where I can hear my neighbors fighting through the walls. And does that matter to you? Daniel asked. The money? Elena considered the question honestly. Not the money itself, but what it represents, yes. Power, influence, the ability to change things. You live in a world where you can make a real difference, where your decisions affect hundreds of people. I live in a world where my biggest daily decision is whether I use whole milk or skim milk in someone's coffee. You're wrong about one thing, Daniel said. My decisions may affect hundreds of people, it's true, but your stories can affect souls, change the way someone sees the world, make someone feel less alone. That's not small, Elena. That's extraordinary. Elena felt tears prick at her eyes. You haven't even read my stories. I don't need to read them to know. I can see it in you, in the way you talk about finding magic in the little moments. I can feel it in the way you made me want to talk about things I never discuss with anyone. Daniel, let me finish, he said. You asked if it matters that I have money. The truth is, it's been more of a burden than a blessing lately. It makes it impossible to know if people like me for who I am or what I represent. It makes every conversation a performance, every relationship a transaction. Even tonight, for a few hours, I was just Daniel. A man drinking wine with an interesting woman who made him laugh. Not Carter Holdings, not the billionaire, not the man who appears on Forbes lists. Just me. Elena studied him through the soft light of the lounge, seeing beyond the expensive suit and polished confidence to something more vulnerable beneath. For the record, she said finally, you're still just Daniel to me. A Daniel who happens to have a lot of money, but still just Daniel. Even knowing I can buy anything in this city. Especially knowing that, Elena said, because now I know you chose to spend your evening talking to me, not because you had to, but because you wanted to. Daniel smiled, not the polite smile she had seen in the ballroom, but something genuine and relieved. So, he said, what do we do with this information? Elena looked at him. This man who could have anything in the world, but seemed to value an honest conversation more, and wondered the same thing. Elena's phone buzzed the next morning while she was making coffee in her small kitchen, still wearing the t-shirt she had slept in. The sunlight filtered through her cheap curtains, casting golden patterns on the worn wooden floor. For a moment she had wondered if the previous night had been an elaborate dream, until she saw the message on the screen. I hope you got home okay. I have a strange question. Do you have any plans today? Daniel. Elena stared at the phone, her heart racing. Part of her had assumed the magic of the night before would dissolve with the light of day, that Daniel would return to his business world and she to hers of coffee cups and overdue bills. She typed and deleted several responses before settling on, no official plans. What's the strange question? The reply came quickly. You mentioned yesterday that you love bookstores. Do you know Book Culture in Brooklyn? I thought maybe we could continue our conversation among a few shelves. No pressure, only if you want. Elena smiled, imagining Daniel carefully typing the message, probably worried about not seeming too forward. I know it. Actually, it's my favorite place in the world. What time? 2 hours. And, Elena, thank you for saying yes. 3 hours later, Elena was walking the familiar streets of Brooklyn, feeling butterflies in her stomach that she hadn't felt in years. She had changed clothes 4 times before settling on a simple light blue cotton dress and comfortable sneakers. She wanted to look put together, but still be herself. Book Culture was a cozy independent bookstore with floor-to-ceiling wooden shelves and cozy corners, with worn armchairs where customers could lose themselves in books for hours. The smell of new paper and coffee always made Eleanor feel at home. She found Daniel in the contemporary fiction section, holding a copy of The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and looking completely absorbed in the back cover. Dressed in dark jeans and a light blue shirt, he looked younger, more relaxed than the night before. "Good choice," Elena said, approaching. "One of my favorite reads from last year." Daniel looked up and smiled, that genuine smile she had only seen glimpses of the night before. "Elena, you made it." "Of course I did. I wouldn't miss the chance to show my territory," she teased, "although I must admit I'm surprised you know this place." "Can I make a confession?" Daniel said, putting the book back on the shelf. "I've never been here before. I Googled best independent bookstores in Brooklyn this morning, and this one appeared on all the lists." Eleanor laughed. "You Googled bookstores because of me. I thought it would be more authentic than inviting you to another 5-star hotel," Daniel admitted. "Plus, you said this was your favorite place in the world. I wanted to understand why." "Well," Elena said, gesturing around them, "this is it. It's real. People here love books because they love stories, not because they're trying to impress anyone. You can spend hours here and no one bothers you to buy something. It's safe." "Safe how? Like a place where you can be who you really are," Eleanor explained, walking toward the poetry section. "No pretensions, no judgments. Just you and the words of people who understood something about life and tried to put it on paper." Daniel followed her, watching as she navigated the shelves with an intimate familiarity. "You really love this, don't you? It's not just a hobby for you." "It's more than love," Eleanor said, pulling a volume of Maya Angelou and flipping through the pages. "It's a need. When I was a kid, and my parents fought, I would hide in my closet with a flashlight and read until I fell asleep. Books saved me in so many ways I can't even count." "And now you want to save others the same way," Daniel observed. "Exactly," Eleanor said, surprised by his understanding. "I want to write stories that make someone feel less alone, you know? Stories that say, hey, you're not the only one who feels this way." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment, Eleanor pointing out her favorite books, and Daniel listening with genuine curiosity. She noticed how he truly paid attention, not just waiting for his turn to speak, but absorbing every word as if it were important. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said when they stopped in the biography section. "Yesterday, you mentioned you feel like an observer of your own life. When did that start?" Daniel considered the question, picking up a book on Steve Jobs and examining the cover. "I think gradually. I started at my dad's company right after college, just to learn the business. Somehow 20 years passed, and I became the person everyone expected me to be, but not necessarily who I wanted to be." "Who did you want to be? Honestly?" "I wanted to be a teacher," Daniel said, a note of surprise in his own voice, as if he were admitting this for the first time. "History, specifically. I wanted to spend my days talking about the past with young people who were discovering how they wanted to shape the future." Elena stopped walking. "You wanted to be a teacher?" "I still do sometimes," Daniel admitted. "When I'm in endless meetings about quarterly projections and acquisition strategies, I catch myself thinking about classrooms and discussions about how social movements change the world." "Why didn't you do it?" "Family responsibility, expectations, the weight of a company that employs thousands of people," Daniel listed. "And I admit, security. It's easy to get stuck in a life that works, even if it's not the life you want." Elena studied him, seeing a vulnerability he probably rarely showed. "It's not too late, you know, to change. It's not that simple." "No," Elena agreed, "but it's not impossible either. You have resources most people don't. You could find a way to do both, or transition gradually, or fall in love with someone who makes me want to remember why it's important to pursue what we really want," Daniel said softly, meeting her eyes. The air between them shifted, charged with an electricity that made Eleanor forget where she was. "Daniel, sorry," he said quickly. "I was too direct. You make me want to be more honest about everything." "Don't apologize," Elena said, echoing his words from the night before. I haven't dated in a long time. Since Thomas, actually. And with you being who you are, being who I am. Being someone who can have anything they want," Elena explained. "I don't know how to navigate that. I don't know how to be myself when you live in a world so different from mine. Daniel placed the book back on the shelf and turned fully toward her. Eleanor, last night was the first time in years I felt really present in my own life. Not because you were impressed with my money or my position, but because you saw me, really saw me. I still see you, Elena said softly. That's what scares me. Why does it scare you? Because I could get used to it, Elena admitted. Being seen, with conversations that matter, with someone who asks about my dreams as if they could really become a reality. Daniel took a step closer. And what if they could? Daniel. No, listen, he said. I know we've just met. I know our worlds are different. But I also know I don't want this conversation to end when we leave this bookstore. Eleanor looked around the store that had been her refuge for so many years, then back at this man who somehow had become part of her story in less than 24 hours. So what do we suggest? She asked. That we give it a chance, Daniel said. Slowly, with no pressure, but a real chance to see where this could lead. Eleanor felt her heart race, all her carefully built defenses fighting against the possibility he was offering. Okay, she said finally, but with one condition. Anything. No 5-star hotels or impossible-to-get reservations restaurants. If we're going to do this, we're doing it my way first. Small cafes, park walks, real places where real people go. Daniel smiled, and Elena saw genuine relief in his eyes. I wouldn't have it any other way. And there, among shelves filled with love stories others had written, Elena wondered if she was about to begin writing her own. The first surprise came on a typical Tuesday, hidden among the books Elena had mentioned during their walk through the bookstore. When she arrived at work at the Daily Grind, she found a simple brown bag by the back door with her name written in careful handwriting. Inside 3 books. The new Toni Morrison biography she had sighed over when she saw it on the shelf, too expensive for my budget this month, a collection of short stories by Alice Munro, and a pristine copy of On Writing by Stephen King. There was no card, just a small note. To continue our conversation about stories that save souls. D. Eleanor held the books to her chest, feeling something warm spread across her ribcage. It wasn't the generosity itself that touched her, though it was certainly kind, but the attention. Daniel had really listened. He had remembered not only the titles, but the longing in her voice when she talked about them. Someone has a secret admirer, joked Jake, her co-worker, peeking over her shoulder. It's not a secret, Elena murmured, but still smiled. The following encounters were exactly as Elena had asked, simple, real, without pretension. Daniel would appear at the cafe during her breaks, always ordering just a black coffee, and sitting at the corner table where she could see him while she worked. They would walk through Prospect Park on Sunday mornings, talking about everything and nothing as they watched families picnic and children chase pigeons. He never arrived in flashy cars or with grand gestures. Instead, he showed up on foot, wearing jeans and simple t-shirts, carrying a copy of the book he was reading, always something from the list Eleanor had casually mentioned. Are you really reading Virginia Woolf? Eleanor asked during a walk, noticing the well-worn copy of Mrs. Dalloway in his hand. Trying, Daniel admitted. I won't lie. It's challenging. But you said she changed the way you think about narrative, so I want to understand why. And what do you think so far? Daniel stopped walking, seriously considering the question. It's like she's painting with words instead of just telling a story. Every sentence has layers. I'm reading slowly, trying to savor it instead of just consuming it. Elena felt her heart skip a beat. Most people in her life, including Thomas, had always treated her passion for literature as a cute hobby, something to tolerate. But Daniel was actually trying to understand something that mattered to her. Do you want me to lend you my notes? She offered. I wrote an entire analysis on her use of stream of consciousness. You saved your college notes? I save all my notes, Elena said, blushing slightly. Jake says my apartment looks like a library that exploded. I'd love to see them, Daniel said, and his voice carried a sincerity that made Elena believe he really wanted to. The small surprises continued. A note left under the saucer of her coffee on Monday. Thinking of you and the story you told about your grandmother yesterday. Hope you write about her one day. A text message with a photo of a graffiti on a wall in the Lower East Side. This reminded me of what you said about art appearing in the most unexpected places. Elena began to look for these small signs of Daniel in her daily life, and she always found them. They weren't grand romantic gestures like the ones Thomas used to make. Expensive flowers that died in a week. Dinners at restaurants where she felt obligated to be impressed. Instead, they were silent evidence that Daniel was paying attention, that the details of her life mattered to him. "You're different," Olivia remarked during their lunch on Friday. They were sitting at a small Vietnamese cafe, sharing spring rolls, while Elena tried and failed to hide her constant smile. "Different how?" "More present," Olivia said, gesturing with her fork. "Like you're actually here in this life, instead of just passing through, waiting for the real life to begin." Elena considered her friend's words. Olivia was right. For years, she had felt like she was just marking time, waiting for her real life to begin when she finally published a book, when she got a better job, when she became the person she thought she should be. But lately, each day felt complete in itself. "It's because of him, isn't it?" Olivia continued. "This mysterious man you barely mention but who clearly makes you smile every time your phone rings." "It's not just because of him," Elena said, though she knew she wasn't being entirely honest. He makes me remember things I used to like about myself, before I started measuring my worth by other people's expectations." "Like what?" Eleanor stirred her coffee, trying to find the right words. "With Thomas, I always felt like I was being tested. Like every conversation was an opportunity to prove I was smart enough, interesting enough, sophisticated enough to deserve his time. With Daniel, I don't feel like that. How do you feel?" "Like my opinion on Virginia Woolf is as interesting as any academic analysis. Like my stories about serving coffee are just as valid as any important corporate event. Like I am enough, exactly as I am." Olivia smiled. "That sounds like a man worth getting to know." "It is," Elena admitted, "but it also scares me." "Why?" "Because it's easy to get used to being seen like that. What if I'm fooling myself? What if this is just newness for him, and eventually he'll realize that I'm really just a waitress with dreams too big?" "Eleanor," Olivia said, leaning forward seriously, "you have to stop selling yourself short. You're not just anything. You're a writer who works at a cafe to pay the bills. You're a woman who reads Toni Morrison and still knows how to recommend the perfect coffee for a grumpy customer. You're someone who sees magic in the little moments and makes others see it too." That night, Eleanor was closing the cafe when Daniel appeared outside the glass door, holding 2 cups of coffee from another place and smiling shyly. "I thought you might be tired of coffee after spending a whole day making it for others," he said, when she opened the door. "Where did you bring this from?" Eleanor asked, accepting the hot cup. "From the 24-hour place on the corner. The guy behind the counter said it was decent coffee for decent people." Eleanor laughed. "That's a high recommendation coming from Mr. Park." They sat on the steps in front of the cafe, watching the Brooklyn night unfold. People returning from work, college students heading to dates, the everyday life of a city that never really sleeps. "Can I tell you something?" Daniel said after a comfortable silence. "Always. The past few weeks have been the first time in a long while that I've woken up excited for the day to begin, not because I have important meetings or big decisions to make, but because I might see you or get a message from you or just think about something funny you said." Elena felt warmth rise in her chest. "Daniel, you don't have to say anything," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know that you make me remember there's life beyond the numbers and strategies and responsibilities. You make me remember that it's worth living, not just surviving." Elena looked at this man who could be anywhere in the world, doing anything, but chose to be here, sitting on the steps of a cafe in Brooklyn, drinking 24-hour coffee and talking about life like it really mattered. "You remind me too," she said softly. "You remind me that maybe I'm worthy of someone who really sees me." And there, under the neon lights of an ordinary street, Eleanor began to believe that it might be possible to be loved exactly as she was. Reality hit Elena like a cold wave on a Thursday night when Daniel invited her to join him for a contemporary art exhibition at MoMA. She had initially hesitated. Formal cultural events always made her feel like she was wearing a costume that didn't quite fit. But Daniel had gently insisted it would be different, that it would just be the two of them exploring art together. "It's a Basquiat retrospective," he had said. "You mentioned how much you love the way he blends words and images. Thought it might be interesting." As always, he had paid attention to the details she had let slip in casual conversations. As always, she couldn't say no. The exhibition itself was magical. Elena lost herself in the vibrant, chaotic paintings, the scribbled words that screamed truths about identity and power. Daniel walked alongside her, asking genuine questions about her interpretations, listening as if her opinions were as valid as any renowned art critic's. "Look at this," Elena murmured, standing in front of a canvas that blended text and figures in dense layers of meaning. "The way he uses words, it's almost like visual poetry, as if each word has physical weight in the composition." "Is that what you try to do in your writing?" Daniel asked. "Give physical weight to words?" Elena looked at him, surprised by the insight in his question. "That's exactly it. I want each word to have purpose, to carry real emotion." They were leaving the exhibition, Elena still vibrating with the energy of the works, when everything changed. "Mr. Carter." The voice came from behind them, formal and urgent. Elena turned to see a man in a dark suit, wearing a discreet earpiece, and an expression that spoke of important business. "Marcus," Daniel sighed, and Elena could hear the resignation in his voice. "I thought we agreed tonight was off limits." "I apologize, sir, but the board is meeting. There's an emergency situation with the acquisition of Hartley Industries. They need your decision tonight." Elena watched the transformation happen in real time. Daniel, who had spent the last hour discussing raw emotions in abstract paintings, straightened, his shoulders taking on a posture she had never seen before. His expression became more controlled, more distant. "What kind of emergency?" Daniel asked, his voice taking on an authoritative tone that made Elena feel like a stranger observing from the outside. "Last-minute regulatory issues. The lawyers say we have a 6-hour window to restructure the deal, or we lose the opportunity completely." "Hartley Industries," Elena repeated quietly, recognizing the name. She had read about the company in the newspapers, a billion-dollar acquisition that would affect thousands of jobs. Daniel looked at her, and she saw both apology and frustration in his eyes. "Elena, I'm sorry. I really need to..." "Go," she said quickly, trying not to let it show how out of place she felt. "It's important." "Can I take you home first?" "No, it's fine. I'll take the subway." "Sir," Marcus interrupted politely, "the car is waiting. If we could..." "1 minute," Daniel said firmly, and there was something in his voice that made the security guard step back. But Elena was already retreating, creating both physical and emotional distance. "Daniel, it's really fine. Go. They need you." She turned and started walking toward the museum stairs before he could protest. Behind her, she heard Marcus say, "Sir, we really need to go. The board is waiting." On the street, Elena walked quickly toward the subway station, trying to process what had just happened. It wasn't the interruption itself that bothered her. She understood that Daniel had enormous responsibilities. It was the way his world had manifested so suddenly, reminding her of who he truly was when he wasn't sitting in Brooklyn cafes or walking in parks. The man who had spent 20 minutes discussing the nuances of a painting had instantly transformed into the CEO making billion-dollar decisions. And she was the waitress left behind. Elena heard nothing from Daniel for 3 days. She tried not to care, tried to focus on work and writing, but found herself checking her phone constantly. Each notification made her expect a message from him, an explanation, an apology, anything. But her phone remained frustratingly silent. On the 3rd day, she saw a news article about the Hartley Industries acquisition, how Daniel Carter had skillfully navigated regulatory complications to close a deal that would create thousands of jobs. There was a photo of him leaving a corporate building, wearing an impeccable suit and an expression of total confidence. He looked like he belonged entirely to that world, a world where decisions were made in boardrooms overlooking the city, where people used words like synergy and optimization as if they were poetry. "Are you okay?" Jake asked during her shift at the cafe. "You're looking distant." "I'm fine," Elena lied, preparing a latte with mechanical movements. "Just thinking." "About the mysterious guy?" Elena didn't answer, but Jake knew her too well not to notice. "I want some unsolicited advice," he offered. Not really. If he's making you question your own worth, he's not the right guy, Jake said anyway. You're worth so much more than that, Elena. That night, Elena was closing the cafe alone when she saw Daniel through the glass door. He was standing outside wearing jeans and a simple jacket, holding 2 cups of coffee like he had done so many times before. But this time, there was a hesitation in his posture that hadn't been there before. Eleanor opened the door slowly. "Hi," he said, extending one of the cups to her. "Hi," she replied, accepting the coffee but not moving to let him in. Can I explain?" "You don't owe me an explanation," Eleanor said, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. "Eleanor, the last 3 days have been hell, not just because of work, but because I hated the way things ended the other night." "Things ended exactly as they should have," Elena said, trying to keep her voice firm. "You had a work emergency. You dealt with it. End of story." "It's not the end of the story," Daniel said, stepping closer, "and you know it's not." Eleanor stared at him, seeing frustration and something that looked like vulnerability in his eyes. "Daniel, what happened the other night was a reminder of who we really are. You're someone who makes decisions that affect thousands of people. I'm someone who serves coffee and writes stories that no one reads." "That's not—" "It is," Elena interrupted, "and there's nothing wrong with that. But we can't pretend there isn't a fundamental difference between our lives." Daniel stood quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "Do you want me to choose between you and my work? I want you to be honest about what this really is," Elena said, "because when your security guard shows up next time, and there will be a next time, I need to know where I fit into your list of priorities." "You fit at the top," Daniel said immediately. "Even when billions of dollars are at stake, even when thousands of jobs depend on your decisions, even when your board is waiting." Daniel opened his mouth to respond, then closed it, and Elena saw the realization form in his eyes. He couldn't make that promise, and they both knew it. "I thought so," Elena said softly. "You're a good man, Daniel, but you're also who you are, and I need to decide if I can live with that." She entered the cafe and closed the door, leaving Daniel outside on the dark sidewalk, holding a cup of coffee that was cooling rapidly. 2 weeks passed in a silence that seemed louder than any conversation Elena and Daniel had ever had. Elena threw herself into work with an intensity that even worried Jake, staying late organizing stock and creating new drink menus as if constant activity could silence the thoughts that kept her awake at night. It was on a Monday morning, when Elena arrived early to open the cafe, that she saw the man in the suit standing next to the adjacent building, a small commercial space that had been empty for months, with a faded "For Rent" sign stuck to the dusty window. "Excuse me," the man approached when she stopped to look for the keys. "Are you Eleanor Brooks?" Eleanor hesitated. "Yes." "Can I help you?" "My name is Robert Chen. I'm a commercial real estate broker. I have a somewhat unusual proposal for you." "What kind of proposal?" Robert gestured toward the empty space. "This property, my client would like to offer it to you." Eleanor blinked. "Offer it to me? What do you mean?" "To buy, lease, or any arrangement that works for you. I understand you're interested in opening your own business, a combination cafe and bookstore." Elena's stomach dropped. She had never mentioned this dream to anyone except Olivia and Daniel. "Who's your client?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "I'd prefer not to disclose that information at this moment, but I can assure you, it's someone who believes strongly in your potential." Eleanor looked at the space. It was perfect. Large windows that would let in natural light, enough room for bookshelves and a few tables, an ideal location between a subway station and a high school. It was exactly the kind of place she dreamed of during her shifts at the Daily Grind. "Can I see inside?" she heard herself ask. Robert smiled and pulled out a set of keys. "Of course." The interior was even better than she had imagined. The original wooden floor was in good condition. There was a small mezzanine that would be perfect for a poetry section, and the back kitchen needed only minor adjustments to work as a coffee preparation area. "It used to be a bookstore," Robert explained as they walked through the space. "It closed when the owner retired, but the basic infrastructure is still here." Eleanor ran her fingers over a wooden bookshelf still fixed to the wall, imagining what it would be like to fill it with her favorite books, to create a space where people could discover their next favorite read alongside the perfect coffee. What would the price be? She asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. Well, this is the interesting part. My client is prepared to transfer the property directly to you with no initial costs, just a symbolic transfer fee. Eleanor turned to face him. That's impossible. This space is worth at least $300,000 in the current market, Robert completed. Yes, I'm aware. Why would anyone do this? As I said, my client believes in your potential. He sees this as an investment in the future of the community. Elena felt tears of frustration prick her eyes. It was everything she had ever wanted, offered on a silver platter, and that was exactly why she couldn't accept it. I need to think about this, she said finally. Of course, but Elena, opportunities like this don't come around often. That night, Elena sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the papers Robert had left with her. The contract was simple, straightforward, and incredibly generous. Very generous. Her phone rang. Daniel. She let it ring until it went to voicemail, then listened to the message. Elena, I know you probably don't want to talk to me right now, but I need you to know that the offer is real and comes with no strings attached. It's not an attempt to buy your forgiveness or control your life. It's just, you deserve to have your dreams, and if I can help with that without expecting anything in return, then I want to do that. Please, at least consider it. Eleanor played the message again, hearing the sincerity in his voice but also the painful familiarity of someone used to solving problems with money. She called Olivia. He did what? Olivia practically yelled on the other end of the line. He offered to buy a property for me, for my dream cafe bookstore. And what's the problem? Liv, seriously. No, seriously. A rich guy you like offers to make your biggest professional dream come true, and you're complaining. Because it wouldn't be my dream if he bought it for me, Elena explained. It would be his dream of making me happy. There's a difference. You're being too proud. I'm being independent. If I accept this, it will always be the place Daniel bought for me, not the place I created. There will always be an implied debt, even if he never calls it in. Olivia sighed. So what are you going to do? I'm going to decline. Eleanor, no, Liv. Listen, I spent 2 years with Thomas feeling like I had to prove I deserved to be in his life. I'm not going to start another relationship feeling like I owe someone something. The next day, Eleanor called Robert Chen. Thank you for the offer, she said, but I'll have to decline. May I ask why? It's an exceptional deal. Because it needs to be mine, Elena said simply. My way, in my time, with my own sweat. I understand. And if I told you there are other options, financing with very favorable conditions, flexible payment plans, it would still be charity disguised, Eleanor said. Thank you, but no. After hanging up, Eleanor felt strangely relieved. It was terrifying to reject something so perfect, but also liberating. She had chosen her integrity over convenience, her independence over security. That afternoon, Daniel appeared at the cafe. Elena saw him through the window before he entered, standing outside as if gathering courage. When he finally walked in, the cafe was empty, except for a woman in the corner reading a novel. I heard you declined, Daniel said, walking up to the counter. I did, Elena confirmed, continuing to clean the espresso machine. Can I ask why? Elena stopped cleaning and looked at him. Because I don't want you to be my savior, Daniel. I want you to be my partner. And what's the difference? A savior solves problems for you. A partner solves problems with you. Daniel rested his hands on the counter. And if I told you I want to be your partner? Then you need to understand that this means letting me do things my way, even when you have the resources to make everything easier. It means respecting that I need to build my own life before I can share it with someone. Even if that means it takes longer, even if it's harder. Especially because it means that, Elena said. Daniel, you're used to solving problems quickly, efficiently, but relationships don't work like that. I don't work like that. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. And if I learn to do things your way, then maybe we have a chance, Elena said softly. But I can't teach you this, Daniel. You need to want to learn on your own. He nodded slowly, understanding forming in his eyes. How much time do you need? I don't know. Elena admitted. Enough time to make sure I can be myself with you, regardless of how many zeros are in your bank account. Daniel turned to leave, then stopped. Elena. Yes? You were right about me being your partner versus your savior, and you were right to decline the offer, even though it hurt to hear it. After he left, Elena leaned against the counter, feeling a mix of relief and loss. She had chosen her independence, but that didn't make the choice any less painful. 3 weeks dragged on like months. Elena threw herself into her routine with a fierce determination that masked the emptiness she felt every time she saw a tall man from afar on the street, or when she passed the bookstore where she had walked with Daniel, or when she simply woke up at 3 a.m. thinking about conversations they never had. She had started saving money obsessively, putting every extra cent into a separate account mentally labeled Cafe Dream. It was a pathetic amount compared to what she would need, but it was hers. Each dollar represented an extra hour worked, a homemade meal instead of takeout, a borrowed book from the library instead of a purchased one. It was on a Thursday afternoon, while Elena was organizing stock in the back of the cafe, that she found the envelope. It was hidden between boxes of disposable cups, as if someone had carefully placed it there for only her to find. Her name was written on the front in handwriting she didn't recognize. It wasn't Daniel's handwriting. Inside, a sheet of expensive cream-colored paper with no letterhead or identification. Elena, there are people in this world who are born great, and there are people who achieve greatness. But there is a third type, people who have always been great, but hid from that truth because someone told them they were too small for the space they naturally occupied. You are not too small. You never were. The world needs more places where stories are shared, where dreams are nurtured alongside hot coffee, where people can feel seen. The world needs what you have to offer, but more importantly, you deserve to see your dreams come true. Not because someone made them possible for you, but because you made them possible for yourself. Keep building, keep dreaming, keep being exactly who you are, someone who believes in you. Elena read the letter 3 times, feeling something loosen in her chest. It wasn't just the words, though they were exactly what she needed to hear. It was how the writer had understood her struggle, her need to do things on her own. She knew it was from Daniel, even without a signature. She could feel his voice in the words, his understanding of who she truly was beneath all her insecurities. That night, Eleanor was sitting in her small apartment rereading the letter when Olivia showed up with a bottle of wine and a determined expression. "Intervention time," Olivia announced, placing the wine on the coffee table. "You're being ridiculous." "Hi to you too," Elena said dryly. "Elena, I'm serious. You're wasting something real because of pride." "It's not pride. It's self-preservation." Olivia threw herself onto the couch beside her. "Okay, let's break this down. A man you clearly love. I didn't say I love him. You don't have to. It's written all over your face every time someone mentions his name. A man you love tried to do something nice for you, and you rejected him because you didn't want to feel like you owe him something." Exactly. But Elena, relationships are about owing each other things. Not financial debts, but emotional debts. Affection, support, presence. You think you're protecting your independence, but you're actually protecting yourself from vulnerability. Elena was quiet, swirling the wine in her glass. "Can I tell you about David?" Olivia continued, mentioning her boyfriend of 3 years. "What's David got to do with this?" "When we met, I had just come out of a terrible relationship where I felt financially dependent. I was determined never to depend on anyone for anything again. When David offered to pay for dinner on our 3rd date, I almost broke up with him right then. And what changed? I realized there's a difference between dependence and interdependence. Dependence is needing someone to be who you are. Interdependence is choosing to share who you are with someone." Elena considered her friend's words. "But what if I accept help from him, and then he decides we're not compatible? What if I get stuck in something he made possible? What if you don't accept, and then realize you wasted the chance to build something beautiful with someone who really sees you?" Olivia retorted. "Elena, risks are part of love. They always have been. Thomas made me feel like I needed him to be someone important. And how does Daniel make you feel?" Eleanor paused. "Like I already am important." like he just wants to amplify who I already am. So what's really the problem? Eleanor rested her head in her hands. I'm afraid that if I let him help me, I'll stop fighting for my own dreams. I'm afraid of settling. Or, Olivia said softly, you could find that having someone who believes in you makes it easier to believe in yourself. After Olivia left, Eleanor stayed up late, rereading the anonymous letter and thinking about her friend's words. She got up and went to the drawer where she kept her writing notebooks, years of stories, observations, dreams scribbled on paper. She picked up the most recent one and flipped through until she found what she was looking for, a story she had started to write weeks earlier about a woman who meets a stranger in a hotel. A story about courage, vulnerability, and learning that sometimes people come into our lives exactly when we need them. Elena read her own words about finding magic in the little moments, about the courage to be seen, about love that doesn't demand you be different than what you already are. She realized she had spent so long protecting herself from being hurt that she had forgotten what it was like to truly be loved. And real love, love that's worth something, always involves the risk of being hurt. But it also involves the possibility of becoming more yourself, not less. Eleanor closed the notebook and looked out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Daniel was probably awake too, maybe working late, maybe thinking of her. For the first time in weeks, Eleanor allowed herself to imagine a different future, one where she wasn't just surviving her fears but living beyond them, one where she could accept love without losing herself, one where she could be strong enough to be vulnerable. She picked up her phone, then put it down, picked it up again, wrote a message, deleted it. Finally, she wrote something simple. Thank you for the letter, can we talk? She hesitated with her finger over the send button. Once sent, there would be no turning back. It would be a step towards something that still scared her, but also excited her more than anything had in a long time. Elena took a deep breath and pressed send. Her phone rang almost immediately. Elena! Daniel's voice sounded surprised, hopeful, and a little hesitant. Hi, she said, her voice softer than she intended. Can we meet? There are some things I need to say. They met at the same rooftop, where they had shared wine and vulnerabilities weeks earlier. Daniel had suggested the place, and Elena had agreed. It felt right to return to the place where everything had begun to get complicated, where she had first seen the magnitude of his world. Elena arrived first, her palms sweating despite the cool breeze of the evening. She had spent the entire day working on something she hoped would change everything, but she still wasn't sure if she had the courage to show it to Daniel. When he arrived, Eleanor felt her heart tighten. He looked tired, as if the last few weeks had taken a toll on him too. But when their eyes met, she saw immediate relief, gratitude that she had reached out. Thank you for agreeing to see me, Daniel said, approaching cautiously. Thank you for coming, Elena replied. And for the letter. I hope it wasn't too presumptuous. I just wanted you to know how I feel about who you are. They sat at the same table as before, but this time there was a formality between them that hadn't been there before, the carefulness of two people who had unintentionally hurt each other and were now walking on delicate emotional ground. Daniel, Elena began, I need to tell you a few things. First, I'm sorry for how I handled everything. You were trying to be kind, and I turned it into something it wasn't. You don't have to apologize for protecting your independence, Daniel said. In fact, it was one of the things I admired most about you. But there was a difference between protecting my independence and running from intimacy, Elena admitted. And I was running. Daniel leaned slightly forward. Why? Elena took a deep breath. Because with Thomas, I lost so much of myself trying to be who he wanted me to be. And when you offered to give me everything I've always wanted, a part of me panicked. Not because you were trying to control me, but because I was afraid it would be so easy to let you solve my problems that I would stop solving them on my own. And now? Now I realize there's a difference between someone solving your problems for you and someone supporting you while you solve them on your own. Elena pulled an envelope from her bag, similar to the one she had found at the cafe, but much thicker. What's this? Daniel asked. It's a contract, Elena said, her hands trembling slightly. I spent the last 3 days working on it with a lawyer. Daniel furrowed his brow, confused. I found out the space you wanted to offer me is still available, Elena continued. So I bought it. How did you... I used all my savings for the down payment. I got a small loan from the bank and I'll work extra shifts for the next 2 years to pay off the rest. It won't be easy, and I'll probably eat instant noodles more nights than I'd like to admit, but it'll be mine. Daniel took the envelope with careful hands, as if it was something precious. Elena, wait, I'm not done, she said quickly. The important part is on page 3. Daniel flipped to the section Elena had circled in red. His eyes moved across the page, and she saw the exact moment when he understood. You're offering me a partnership, he said, looking at her in surprise. 50-50, Elena confirmed. Not in the business, this is mine, but in everything else. I bring the vision, the hard work, and the passion to create something special. You bring you. Your business acumen, your ability to see the big picture, your way of making people feel heard. Elena, you don't need to... It's not about needing, she interrupted. It's about wanting. I realize I spent so much time trying to prove I could do everything on my own that I forgot I don't want to do everything on my own. I want to build something with you. Not because I need you to make it possible, but because I want you there when it becomes a reality. Daniel was silent for a long moment, reading the contract carefully. Elena watched his face, trying to decipher his expressions. There's a clause here about important decisions, he said finally. All decisions affecting the direction of the business will be made together, Elena confirmed. And there's a dissolution clause in case either of us wants to leave the partnership. And a clause about personal relationships versus professional ones. Elena blushed. I thought it was important to keep things clear. The business is one thing, we are another. And about us? Daniel asked, setting the contract aside. Where does that leave us? Elena met his eyes. That leaves us choosing to consciously be together, not because I need you to save me, or because you need me to validate your humanity, but because we like who we are when we're together. And the differences between our worlds, they're still there, Elena admitted. You'll still have work emergencies that interrupt our meetings. I'll still feel out of place at some of your events, but maybe we can navigate that together instead of letting it pull us apart. Daniel stood up and walked to the edge of the rooftop, looking out over the city lights. Elena watched him, her heart beating fast, waiting for his response. Elena, he said finally, turning to face her, in the last 20 years I've made thousands of business decisions, some good, some bad, most calculated based on risks and returns. He walked back to the table, took a pen from his pocket, and signed the contract. This, he said, is the first decision I'm making completely with my heart. Elena felt tears prick at her eyes. So you accept? I accept being your partner, Daniel said. In everything. He walked up to her, extending his hand. Partners. Elena took his hand, feeling the familiarity of his touch, but this time without fear. Partners. And there, high above the city where they had first met as strangers pretending to know each other, Elena and Daniel began something new, something built on choice, not need, on shared strength, instead of hidden weakness. So, Daniel said, not letting go of her hand, when do we start building our dream? Elena smiled, feeling more herself than she had in weeks. We already have. 6 months later, the first page was finally coming to life. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the scent of new pages, creating an atmosphere that made people slow their pace as they passed the window. Elena had chosen the name carefully. Every book had a first page, every story a first moment, every person a first chance to be truly seen. It was a Saturday morning when Elena finally hung the last shelf in the poetry section. Her hands were covered in paint, there was sawdust in her hair, and she had never felt prouder of anything in her life. It's looking beautiful, Daniel said, appearing at the door with 2 cups of coffee and a smile that still made her heart race after all these months. It's looking real, Elena corrected, stepping down from the ladder. Yesterday, I was still imagining what it would be like. Today, I can actually see it. Daniel looked around the space they had transformed together. The reclaimed wood shelves he had helped install, the small tables Elena had found in thrift stores and restored on weekends, The coffee counter they had designed together, functional but warm, practical but inviting. "The first reading is next week," Elena said, accepting the coffee. "I'm nervous." "Why? What if no one shows up? What if people don't understand what we're trying to create here?" Daniel wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer. "Then we'll start small. You, me, and anyone else who wants to hear good stories." "Will you really be here?" Elena asked. "No mysterious corporate emergency?" "Elena," Daniel said, turning fully to face her, "in the last 6 months I've completely restructured my life. I hired an operational CEO to handle day-to-day decisions. I moved meetings around so I can be here on Thursday afternoons when you test new recipes. I've learned the difference between urgent and important, and I've realized that most of the things I thought were important were just urgent. And you don't resent that." "Resent it?" Daniel laughed. "Eleanor, yesterday, I spent 2 hours helping you organize books by color for that themed display. And it was the most satisfying part of my week. Last week, I stayed up until midnight, listening to you read the first chapter of the novel you're writing. These last 6 months have been the most alive I've felt in years." Eleanor smiled, remembering that night. She had hesitated to show her writing to Daniel, but when she finally did, he listened with the same focused attention he gave to everything she considered important. "About the novel," she said hesitantly. "I need to tell you something." "What?" "It's about us. Well, a fictional version of us. About a woman who hugs a stranger in a hotel and discovers that sometimes the best stories start with the most unexpected moments." Daniel frowned. "Are you writing our story?" "Our story inspired the fiction," Eleanor corrected. "But the real story is much better than anything I could invent." "Why?" "Because in fiction, I would have made the female character accept help more easily. I would have made the hero less complicated, the obstacles less real. But our story has all the hard parts, and still, it worked." Daniel pulled her closer. "It worked because we allowed ourselves to be complicated, because we didn't try to be perfect for each other." They were interrupted by the doorbell. Eleanor turned to see a young woman peeking through the glass, holding a young child's hand. "Sorry," the woman said when Elena opened the door. "I saw the sign about story time for kids. Are you open yet?" "Not officially," Elena said, "but come on in." The child, a girl of maybe 5, ran immediately to the children's section, her eyes widening as she saw the carefully organized picture books on the low shelves. "Can I?" the girl asked, pointing to a book. "Of course," Eleanor said. "You can take anyone you want." As the child got lost in the books, her mother approached the counter where Daniel was preparing coffee. "This place is exactly what the neighborhood needed," she said. "A place where kids can discover they love reading, where parents can relax with decent coffee." "That was the idea," Elena said, watching the girl already absorbed in a book about a girl who wanted to be an astronaut. After they left, with 3 books purchased and promises to return for official story time, Elena and Daniel were alone again in the space they had created. "Did you see how her eyes lit up?" Elena said. "That's it. That's exactly what I wanted. A place where stories come to life," Daniel said. "A place where people feel seen." Daniel walked over to a specific shelf in the contemporary fiction section, a small display he had created without telling Elena. 2 copies of each of her favorite books, arranged so there was always one available for customers, and another that remained as part of the store's permanent collection. "You still do that?" Elena said, noticing his action. "You always make sure there are 2 copies of my favorite books. I want others to discover them," Daniel said, "but I also want you to always have access to the stories that made you want to write your own." Eleanor felt that familiar tightness in her chest, not from anxiety but from gratitude. "How do you always know exactly the right thing to do?" "I don't know. I just pay attention to what matters to you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the shelves full of possibilities. The coffee counter waiting for the first official customers, the reading area with comfy armchairs where people would soon create memories with new books. "Daniel?" Eleanor said finally. "Yes? Thank you for letting me do this my way. Thank you for letting me be a part of it." Eleanor looked at this man who had entered her life as a convenient stranger and had become something much deeper. A true partner who supported her without trying to control her, who loved her without trying to change her. "Ready to officially open on Monday?" Daniel asked. Ready, Elena said, taking his hand. Ready to see what stories we help start. And there, surrounded by thousands of stories written by others, Elena and Daniel knew they were writing their own, one line at a time, one choice at a time, one page at a time. Sometimes the moments that change our lives begin with a desperate decision. Elena hugged a stranger to escape the past, but found a future she had never dared to imagine. She learned that true love doesn't ask you to be different. It celebrates exactly who you already are. And she discovered that the most powerful dreams are those we build with our own hands, alongside someone who believes in our strength. Because sometimes all someone needs is to be seen. And maybe, deep down, this story is also about us. If this story touched you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let us know. Where are you listening to this message from? Your support is what allows us to continue bringing stories like this.